The auditorium was alive with chatter, laughter, and the restless shuffling of feet. It was a Friday night in a small American town, and families, students, and strangers had all gathered for the annual community talent show. The banners hung high, the stage lights glowed, and the crowd waited to be entertained. Most of the evening had been filled with comedy sketches, dance routines, and magic tricks. People were enjoying themselves, but no one expected anything extraordinary. It was the kind of night where you clap politely, smile, and maybe record a clip or two for social media. And then he walked in. A boy, no more than 16, skinny, wearing worn-out sneakers and a second-hand jacket that looked a little too big for him. His hair was messy, his eyes shy, and his hands trembled as he clutched a cheap, slightly scratched acoustic guitar. The audience barely noticed him at first. He looked like every other nervous teenager who steps onto a stage for the first time. Some people in the back whispered, "Probably another kid strumming a song we won't remember." Even the judges, tired after a long lineup of acts, didn't straighten in their chairs. But then, he cleared his throat and leaned into the microphone. There was a pause, a silence that seemed heavier than the boy himself. "Good evening," he said softly, almost whispering. I'm going to sing a song my father used to play for me. It's called Hotel California." A ripple went through the crowd. Hotel California wasn't just a song. It was a legend, a piece of music etched into history. It wasn't easy to sing, let alone for a nervous teenager with a battered guitar. Some people exchanged doubtful glances. A few even smirked. "He's going to ruin it," someone murmured. But then the first chord rang out. It was shaky, just for a moment. His fingers trembled, but then, like magic, his touch steadied. The hall filled with the familiar, haunting progression of chords. And when he began to sing, the room changed. His voice wasn't polished like a professional's. It wasn't trained, but it was raw, aching with sincerity, soaked in something deeper than skill, truth. Every note carried emotion, every word carried a story, and within moments, the audience leaned forward. Conversations stopped, phones were lowered, the judges looked up, eyes wide. It felt as if he wasn't just singing a song, he was bleeding his soul into it. The boy's name was Daniel. And what the crowd didn't know, what no one in that room could have guessed, was that this wasn't just a performance. It was a farewell. Daniel had grown up in a broken home. His father, once a hopeful musician, had passed away 2 years earlier. The guitar Daniel held was his father's only possession that had survived years of poverty, fights, and finally, tragedy. His mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. They couldn't afford lessons, or even new strings for the guitar most of the time. But Daniel had taught himself to play by watching videos in a public library, sneaking in after school, headphones pressed tight as he copied chords and lyrics. The night of the talent show, he hadn't come for fame or money. He hadn't even come for recognition. He had come because he wanted to honor his father, the man who once told him, "Son, music is the only place where broken people can feel whole." As Daniel sang, something remarkable began to happen. An elderly couple in the front row, who had been whispering about leaving early, stopped and held hands. A teenager in the back, scrolling on his phone, put it away and stared. One of the judges, an old musician who had once toured with a band in the 70s, closed his eyes, transported back to smoky bars and long nights on the road. Even the children in the room, too young to know the song, felt the weight of it and sat quietly. By the second verse, Daniel's voice had grown stronger. He wasn't timid anymore. His pain had transformed into power, his trembling into strength. His eyes glistened as he sang, not to the audience, but to someone who wasn't there anymore, his father. On a dark desert highway, every lyric carried the echo of loss, the ache of longing, and yet, strangely, the promise of hope. And then came the guitar solo. Daniel closed his eyes and let his fingers dance across the strings. The sound was imperfect, but it was alive. It carried the grit of his struggles, the love of his father, and the silent prayers of his mother. It wasn't just music anymore, it was confession, it was memory, it was healing. The audience was silent, utterly speechless. But here is where the unexpected happened. As Daniel played, a man in the third row leaned forward, his eyes wide. His hands shook slightly. He wasn't just listening, he was remembering. His name was Robert Hayes, a record producer who had once worked with rock legends decades ago. He hadn't come tonight looking for talent. In fact, he hadn't planned to come at all. He was dragged in by his granddaughter, who was performing earlier. But now, listening to this boy, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in years. It was the raw honesty of music. Not commercial, not polished, but pure. He whispered to himself, this is what the world has forgotten. Daniel reached the final verse. His voice cracked once, just once, but instead of ruining the moment, it broke the audience's hearts wide open. That crack carried more truth than perfection ever could. And when the last line faded, when the final strum of the guitar lingered in the air, the hall remained in silence. No one moved, no one clapped, not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. And then, like a wave, the applause began. It was slow at first, then thunderous. People stood to their feet. Some wiped away tears. The judges clapped until their hands stung. And in that sea of faces, Daniel looked out, his eyes still shimmering with loss and love. For a moment, he felt his father standing there, smiling, whispering, "You did it, son." But the story didn't end there. After the show, as Daniel quietly packed his guitar, trying to slip away unnoticed, Robert Hayes approached him. "Son," Robert said, voice trembling, "do you know what you just did out there?" Daniel shrugged. "I just sang my dad's favorite song." "No," Robert shook his head. "You reminded us why music matters. You reminded us what it means to feel alive." He handed Daniel a card. "Come see me tomorrow. I want to hear more." Daniel stared at it, stunned. For the first time in years, he felt a door open where all he had seen were walls. Weeks later, Daniel found himself in a studio, recording not just covers, but his own songs, songs about loss, hope, and resilience. The same guitar, with its scratches and scars, carried him into a world he never imagined. And yet, despite the opportunities, despite the growing recognition, Daniel never forgot why he started. At every performance, whether in a coffee shop or later on a bigger stage, he told the story of his father. He told people that music isn't about fame or perfection, it's about healing, about kindness, about giving voice to those who can't speak. And audiences listened, they cried, they remembered. Months later, Daniel stood on a stage much bigger than the community auditorium. Thousands of faces stretched out before him. He sang again, this time not just for his father, but for every person who had ever felt invisible, broken, or lost. And as the crowd erupted, as people hugged strangers, as tears fell freely, Daniel realized something profound. His father was right. Music is where broken people feel whole. And maybe, just maybe, his voice could help heal the world, one song at a time. The boy who once walked on stage with trembling hands, who once sang only for a memory, had left the world speechless, not because he was flawless, but because he was real.